Hey there! Welcome back to the deep dive. So glad you're joining us today.
Yeah, good to be diving in again.
Today, we're getting really specific, really practical. We're tackling a key set of vocabulary words.
That's right. These are pulled straight from Day 7, Part 1 of your study materials.
And our goal here, it's not just about memorizing definitions, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
We want to help you really understand how these words work in actual English sentences, how context shapes them.
Exactly, because mastering them builds that fluency, that confidence you need for reading, especially, for those tough exam texts.
Think of it like this. You're building connections, understanding concepts, not just learning isolated words. We'll use the examples from your materials to kind of map out the meanings.
Hopefully by the end, these words will feel, well, less like roadblocks and more like tools you actually recognize and can use.
That's the aim.
And hey, seriously, if this kind of breakdown works for you, if it helps things click, do us a favor and hit that like button. Subscribing lets us know we're on the right path, helps keep these deep dives going, and maybe share it if you know someone else wrestling with the same vocabulary lists.
It definitely helps to build a bit of a study community, doesn't it? Makes it feel less like you're doing it all alone.
Totally. Your engagement, your likes, shares, comments, that really does fuel what we do here.
It really does.
So today, 16 words, all from Day 7. We're going to take them one by one, look at the examples, see how they actually operate, in the wild.
Building that intuition. Ready to jump in.
Let's do it. Okay, first word up. This initial batch seems to have a theme, maybe around time, order, that kind of thing. First on the list is previous. Your source says it's an adjective.
Right. And the example sentence we have is, any plans submitted before that date are considered to be under the previous rules.
Okay, previous rules. So what's previous telling us there about the rules?
It's telling us that these rules, they were the ones in effect before that specific date mentioned. They came immediately before the current ones, or the ones that started on that date.
So it's about sequence. What came right before?
Exactly. Usually in time. Like your previous job is the one you had just before this one.
Or the previous chapter in a book.
The one right before the one you're reading now. It's very straightforward, just indicating the immediately preceding item.
Got it. Simple enough. Okay. Next. Prior. Now, this one sounds a lot like previous.
It does.
And your source also lists as an adjective. So are they just the same thing? Can we swap them?
Not always. They can be similar, especially when talking about time. But prior has a couple of key differences and a whole other important meaning. Let's look at the first example for prior.
Okay.
This information must not be disclosed without prior written consent.
All right. Prior written consent. So prior written consent. So prior modifies written consent. What's that telling us?
It means the written consent has to happen before the disclosure. The consent needs to exist prior in time.
Okay, so that does sound like previous, coming in before in time.
In that sense, yes. And that specific phrase, prior written consent, that's a really common one, almost a set phrase you see in legal stuff or formal agreements.
Right, I think I've seen that. But you mentioned another meaning. The source gives the second example. They have a prior claim to the property.
Yes, and this is crucial here, prior claim. It doesn't just mean the claim was made earlier in time, although that might be related.
Okay.
More importantly, it means the claim has precedence. It's considered more important, or it comes first legally compared to other claims. It has a higher rank.
Okay. So prior can mean earlier in time, or it can mean more important, having precedence. That's a big difference.
It really is.
So how do you know which one it is when you read it?
Well, you've got to look at the context. What noun is prior attached to? If it's something like consent, notice, agreement, it's probably about time, especially if you see prior to something happening.
Okay.
But if it's modifying words like claim, right, interest, commitment, then it's much more likely about importance, rank, or precedence.
That makes sense. The word it's describing gives you a huge clue, and you mentioned prior to. The source lists that too, meaning before.
Exactly. Like prior to the meeting, send your reports. It functions just like a preposition, meaning before that point in time.
So prior the adjective. Earlier, or are, more important. Prior to just means before in time. Definitely more layers than previous.
Definitely. Which brings us naturally to priority. Your source lists this as a noun, and it's got that prior root, again, feels like it's about importance.
Yeah, you can sort of feel the connection.
It absolutely is connected. Priority is the noun form. It is the concept of something being more important or needing to come first. First example, they give priority to the most urgent task on hand.
Give priority to. So they're basically saying that task is the most important one. It gets the top rank.
Precisely. They'll deal with it first, put resources towards it first. It is their highest priority. It's the thing that is prior in importance.
Makes sense. And the second example. The search for a new vaccine will take priority over all other medical research.
Right. That structure, take priority over, explicitly compares importance. The vaccine search is being ranked higher than other research.
So it comes first. It gets the focus, the funding, whatever. It is the priority.
Exactly. So priority is that state of being more important, or it can be the important thing itself. Now, your source also gives us a related word, prioritize. With an S or a Z, that's the verb.
Right, prioritize. And the example is, another approach to getting more done in less time is to rethink how you prioritize your day.
Okay, so how does the verb prioritize connect back to the noun priority?
Well, if priority is the important thing, then prioritize must be the action of figuring out what's important or putting things in order.
Exactly that. To prioritize is the action of deciding the order of importance. You look at your list, you identify your priorities, the important things, and then you prioritize your tasks. You arrange them based on that importance.
Okay, so you have priorities, the noun, and you prioritize the verb to manage them.
Perfect. You prioritize your day by deciding which tasks are the main priorities.
That's actually really helpful. Seeing them together, priority, prioritize it, sort of locks in that whole idea of importance and coming first. Like for your own studies, right? You've got a million things to do. You have to figure out your top priorities. Then you need to prioritize your study time to tackle those first.
It gives you the full language toolkit to talk about ordering things by importance.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to prevail. Your source lists this as a verb, and it seems to have two quite different main meanings. One is about being widespread or common. The other is about winning or triumphing.
Yeah, they seem different, but maybe there's a core idea of being dominant or influential. Let's look at the first sense, being widespread. The example is, those beliefs still prevail among certain social groups.
Okay, so what's prevailing? Those beliefs. Where? Among certain social groups. So prevail here means those beliefs are just really common there, widely held.
Exactly. They're dominant within those groups. They're the accepted norm, or very frequently found. If a certain fashion prevails, it's the popular common style.
Got it. Widespread. Now, the second meaning, winning. Example. Fortunately, common sense prevailed.
Right. What won out here? Common sense. The sentence implies there was maybe a conflict or confusion, or maybe foolishness.
Right.
But in the end, common sense won. It was victorious. It became the dominant factor that decided the outcome.
Okay, so it's about winning after a struggle. Justice prevails, reason prevails, that kind of thing.
Overcoming opposition.
So how do you tell which meaning of prevail is intended? Common widespread or winning triumphing?
Context. As always, look at the subject of the verb. If it's things like beliefs, customs, conditions, opinions, it's probably the widespread meaning.
Okay.
But if the subject is common sense, justice, reason, or maybe one side in an argument, then it's much more likely the winning or triumphing meaning.
That's a really useful tip looking at the subject.
Okay.
And your source gives a derivation, prevailing, an adjective.
Yes. And the example, even though it's listed under avail in the source, clearly uses prevailing. It says, she wears a fashionable hairstyle prevailing in the city.
Okay, prevailing hairstyle. How does prevailing work as an adjective there?
It's describing the hairstyle. A prevailing style is one that prevails in the city, meaning it's the common, widespread, popular style right now.
So the adjective prevailing connects directly back to that first meaning of the verb prevail being common or widespread.
Exactly. It describes something that is currently dominant or fashionable.
So prevail, a verb, widespread, or winning, prevailing, adjective. Widespread, common.
Right.
Got it. You have to check the part of speech.
Definitely. Okay, next word, avail. Listed as a verb. Meanings like to be of help or use, or to make use of, take advantage of.
The first example, to avail all these benefits, just register online.
Right. So what are you doing with the benefits? You're availing them.
Meaning, you're using them, taking advantage of them.
Precisely. You're utilizing what's being offered. If there's a service and you avail yourself of it, you're using that service for your own benefit.
Okay, so it's about using something useful or grabbing an opportunity. The second example shows a slightly different structure. Why not avail of our special offers?
Yeah, avail of. It means the same thing, take advantage of, make use of, but it uses that preposition of. You often see avail oneself of something, which is a bit more formal.
So avail benefits or avail of offers both mean using or taking advantage.
Generally, yes. It's about utilization. But then,
Right.
look at this phrase the source gives, of little bay no, avail. And the meaning is of no use.
Wait, what? The verb means to be useful or to use something useful, but of no avail means not useful. That seems backward.
It is. And it's a perfect example of why you can't always guess phrase meanings. Of no avail is a fixed idiom. It means useless, ineffective, producing no result.
So like our efforts were of no avail, meaning our efforts didn't work at all.
Exactly that. All the effort was wasted, it achieved nothing. You just have to learn that specific phrase as a chunk.
Wow. Okay. Good to know. Don't get tripped up to that one. And the source also gives it a derivation available, adjective.
Right. And the example for available is, local officials are using the levers that are available to them to safeguard residents' health.
Okay, levers that are available. Levers here means like tools, powers they have.
Exactly. Resources, means of action. So the available levers are the ones they can use, the ones that are accessible or obtainable.
So available means ready to be used, which makes sense with avail. You can avail yourself of things that are available.
Perfect connection. The state of being ready, available, links to the action of using avail.
Cool. Okay, last word in this first big group. Prevalent. Adjective, meaning widespread, commonly existing or occurring.
This one sounds very close to prevailing, doesn't it?
Yeah, and related to that first meaning of prevail, too. Widespread.
It is very close. Prevalent describes something that is very common, very frequently found, especially in a particular place or among a certain group. Look at the first example. These prejudices are particularly prevalent among people living in the North.
So prevalent means these prejudices are very common in that group. They happen a lot there.
Yes. And the second example. The disease is even more prevalent in Latin America.
Same idea. The disease is very widespread in that area.
Exactly. Both examples use prevalent to describe how common something is, often something negative, like prejudice or disease, in a specific context. It indicates a high frequency.
Okay, let's just quickly recap this section before we move on. We had words about time, previous, prior, prior to, and importance, prior, priority, prioritize. Then words about being widespread or usable, prevail, prevailing, prevalent, avail, available.
Remembering that tricky of no avail phrase.
Right, and seeing how prevail, prevailing, and prevalent all circle around that widespread idea. It really drove home how looking at the context, what the word modifies, is key.
Absolutely. It's about relationships between words, not just isolated definitions. That's how you build real understanding.
Okay, let's shift focus. The next group of words from your list seems to be about manner or mode, like how something is done or how it exists.
Interesting. Moving from precedence and presence to the way things are.
First one is manner, noun, and the source gives a few meanings. Method, way, behavior bearing, and politeness etiquette. Seems like it covers a lot.
It does have these different flavors. Let's use examples. One common meaning, often plural, is about polite behavior. The source implies this usage, like in the sentence, these children need to learn some manners.
Right. Manners, plural, usually means etiquette, saying please, thank you, that stuff.
Exactly. Social rules for behavior. Now, what about the sense of a person's individual way of behaving, their bearing? The source uses this example under arrogant. The chief inspector disliked his arrogant manner.
Ah, yes. His manner was arrogant. So manner here is his personal style of acting, his demeanor.
Precisely. His characteristic way of being and interacting. Now, the third sense, way or method of doing something. Your source gives the phrase, in as obvious a manner as possible.
In as obvious a manner. So manner here just means way.
Exactly. In an obvious manner means in an obvious way. That structure in an adjective manner is super common. In a professional manner, in a quiet manner.
Okay, so manners, plural, etiquette. A person's manner, singular, their behavioral style, and in a certain manner, in a certain way. Got it. Plural versus singular, and the structure help tell them apart.
Paying attention to those clues is key.
Next word, mode, also a noun, meanings, way, style, state of operation. Sounds a bit like the way meaning of manner.
There's overlap, for sure. But mode often suggests something more specific, a distinct setting or state, especially for systems or technology. First example. You can also use this computer game in two-player mode.
Okay, two-player mode, that's a specific setting for the game, right? Different from single-player mode.
Exactly. It defines a specific configuration, like airplane mode or silent mode on your phone. Each is a distinct mode of operation.
And the second example. The operation should be done only once for each mode.
Similar idea. Mode refers to different operational states. Maybe a machine has a cleaning mode and a running mode. You do the operation for each state.
So, while manner can be a general style, mode feels more like a specific, often technical setting or state. like different modes of transportation, car, train, bike. They're distinct systems or methods.
Yeah, it often implies defined categories or states rather than just a general style.
That's right, good distinction. Let's move to the next cluster. These seem to be descriptive words talking about attitudes, characteristics, how people express themselves, words like modest.
Yeah, these are great for describing people and communication, which you see a lot.
First one, modest, adjective. The source gives two main senses: humble, not boastful, and not large, expensive, important.
Right. The first sense is about humility. Someone who achieves things but doesn't brag is modest. It's usually seen positively. The opposite of arrogant, which we'll get to.
Okay. And the second sense, not large or important. Example, the research was carried out on a modest scale.
So modest describes the scale. Modest scale means it wasn't huge, limited resources maybe.
Exactly. Not large scale, not massively funded, relatively small, moderate. Like a modest apartment isn't huge. A modest increase is a small one.
It implies a lack of excess. Now the source also gives the noun modesty. Example, in his autobiography, Darwin himself speaks of his intellectual powers with extraordinary modesty.
So modesty is the quality of being modest, of being humble. Darwin was very humble about his intelligence.
Yes, the noun relates to that first humble meaning of the adjective. But then, check out this really interesting example under modest. The court would be recklessly modest if it followed California's advice.
Recklessly modest. That sounds weird. How can modest, humble, or small be reckless?
This is a fantastic example of how words get specialized meanings. Here, modest isn't about personal humility. It's using that second sense, not large, not ambitious, but applying it to the court's actions or authority.
Yeah.
If the court is recklessly modest, it means they'd be too limited, too restrained in using their power, to the point where it's actually irresponsible or careless. Recklessly. They'd be avoiding their duty by acting too small.
Wow. So it means being overly restrained or limited in scope, and that's being criticized as dangerous in this context. You really have to understand the situation, a court's role, to get that.
Exactly. It shows you can't just rely on the basic definition sometimes. Context is everything, especially in specialized fields.
Definitely a complex one. Okay, next. Earnest. Adjective, meaning very serious and sincere.
This describes a quality of deep seriousness and sincerity, often with determination. First example, despite her earnest efforts, she could not find a job.
Earnest effort. So her efforts were really serious, sincere. She tried really hard.
Exactly. Very genuine, determined effort, not just going through the motions. She was deeply committed.
Okay, and the second example. When I looked over, he was in earnest conversation with his father.
In earnest conversation? What kind of talk is that?
Must be serious, focused, not joking around, discussing something important, maybe.
Precisely. Deeply engaged, sincere discussion. That phrase, in earnest conversation, is quite common for describing that kind of interaction.
So, earnest implies seriousness, sincerity, determination, whether it's actions like efforts or interactions like conversation. If you're earnest about something, you're genuinely serious about it.
It highlights the depth of feeling or commitment.
Now for a contrast, arrogant. Adjective, meaning having an exaggerated sense of self-importance.
Right. This is often the opposite of modest, humble kind. An arrogant person thinks they're way better than others and shows it. First example.
Yeah.
He was a rude, arrogant young man.
Okay, arrogant clearly means overly proud, looking down on people. Pairing it with rude makes the negative picture clear.
Yes. And remember the example for manner. The chief inspector disliked his arrogant manner.
Right, his manner was arrogant, so his behavior showed that self-importance and lack of respect. The adjective describes the quality seen in his actions.
Exactly. Arrogant describes the person or their behavior when they have that inflated sense of self. It's definitely critical.
Last one in this group, eloquent. Adjective, meaning fluent or persuasive in speaking or writing.
This is all about skillful communication. First example. He grew very eloquent on the subject.
What does that mean, grew eloquent on a subject?
It means when he started talking about that topic, he spoke really well. Fluently, persuasively, maybe passionately, he expressed himself clearly and powerfully.
So it describes the quality of his speaking about that subject.
Yes, his ability to communicate effectively on it. Second example, it was an eloquent and well-informed speech.
Here, eloquent describes the speech itself.
Right, an eloquent speech is one that's beautifully expressed, flows well, is persuasive, and makes an impact. Powerful use of language.
So eloquent can describe a person's skill with words or the communication itself if it's well done and persuasive. Definitely a positive quality.
It emphasizes grace and power in language.
Okay, so we've covered modest, humble or limited with that tricky court example, earnest, serious, sincere, arrogant, self-important, and eloquent, skilled in communication. These really help describe people and how they interact.
Vital vocabulary for understanding character and arguments in texts.
All right, let's move to our final set of words for today. These seem to revolve around change, adjustment, choosing between things.
Yeah, words about transformation, options, modifications.
First is alter, verb, meaning to change or make different. Sounds pretty general.
It is quite general. To alter something is just to make it different somehow. First example, he had altered so much I scarcely recognized him.
So the person altered, changed a lot, maybe appearance, maybe personality, a noticeable change.
Exactly, a transformation from how he was before. Second example, an unauthorized hacker has been able to access a computer database and to alter information stored there.
Hackers alter information, meaning they change it, right? Modify it, maybe delete it, add fake stuff.
Precisely. They make the data different from its original correct state. So alter is just about making something different. Now, your source gives a derivation. Alternate, listed as adjective and verb.
Right, adjective, every other, verb. Occur by turns, change repeatedly between two states.
And the example for the verb alternate. They believed that the Earth's climate alternated between periods of extreme cold and warm.
Okay, the climate alternated. It switched back and forth between cold and warm.
Yes, that's the key meaning of the verb alternate. It's not just any change. It's a repeated switching between two distinct states or options. Back and forth, back and forth.
So that's different from alter, which could just be a one-way change.
Exactly. Alternate implies that cycle or switching, and the adjective alternate means every other one, alternate weeks, alternate lines.
Okay, alter, general change. Alternate verb, switch back and forth. Alternate adjective, every other. Clear distinction.
Good. Next word. Alternative. Noun or adjective. It seems connected to choices.
Yeah, like having another option.
That's exactly it. An alternative is another possibility or choice. The noun example. The car is too expensive, so we're trying to find a cheaper alternative.
They're looking for a cheaper alternative, meaning another option that costs less. The alternative is the other choice.
Perfect. Now the adjective example. What Washington does to promote alternative energy may mean less and less.
Alternative energy, what kind of energy?
Energy from sources that are different from the traditional ones. Solar, wind, there are alternative options to fossil fuels. The adjective describes something that is another choice or possibility.
Got it. Noun, the choice itself. Adjective describes something that is a choice, always about having another option.
Signifies a different path available.
Okay, next. Switch. Noun and verb. Noun is like a light switch. Verb is to change or convert. Sounds like changing from one thing to another.
It is. The noun is often that physical control. First example, he flipped a switch and the lights came on.
The thing on the wall, the
Right.
control.
Exactly. Now the verb is the action of changing. Example, when our brains switch between being focused and unfocused on a task, they tend to be more efficient.
Brains switch between states. They change from focused to unfocused and back.
Yes. To switch is to change from one state, option, or system to another. You switch tasks, switch gears, switch your focus.
And the source mentions switch on and switch off.
Right, phrasal verbs. Directly related to the noun. To switch on or switch off a device means to turn it on or off. Basically synonyms for turn off, especially for electronics.
Okay, so switch is the control, noun, or the act of changing between things, verb. And the phrasals mean turn on off.
Makes sense. Last word for today. Modify. Verb. Meaning to make partial or minor changes. To make it more suitable. Sounds like alter.
It does, but that definition adds make it more suitable. Is that the key difference?
That's often the nuance, yes. While alter is general change, modify usually suggests making specific adjustments, often to improve something, tailor it, or make it fit better. The changes might be less drastic than a full alteration. Look at the first example. The software we use has been modified for us.
Ah, modified first. So the changes weren't random. They were adjustments to suit their specific needs.
Exactly, tailoring it, making it more appropriate for them. Second example, patients are taught how to modify their diet.
They learn to modify their diet. Does that suggest making adjustments rather than a complete overhaul, like cutting back on salt, adding vegetables?
Often, yes. It implies adapting the existing diet, making changes to make it healthier or more suitable for their condition. Modify suggests refining, adjusting, adapting, usually for improvement or suitability. Alter could just be any change.
Okay, that's a useful distinction. Modify, adjust for suitability, alter general change.
Yes, modify often carries that sense of refinement.
Wow, okay. 16 words covered. That was quite a journey. We went through time and priority, prioritize, being widespread or usable, prevail, prevailing, prevalent, avail, available.
Remembering prior's two meanings and that tricky of no avail.
Yes. Then manner and mode, mode. Then attitudes and expression, modest, earnest, arrogant, eloquent.
Including that complex, recklessly modest example.
Right. And finally, change and adjustment, alter, alternate, alternative, switch, modify.
And hopefully, really digging into those examples like previous rules versus prior claim, giving priority, how common sense prevailed, what you can avail yourself of, the different senses of manner and modest, how you alter data versus modify a diet. Hopefully that starts to build that gut feeling for how these words actually work.
Totally. It's seeing them in action that makes the difference, isn't it? Not just a definition floating in space, seeing how it connects, how the meaning shifts with context.
That is reading comprehension, fundamentally. Recognizing those patterns, like how prior changes based on the noun, or how modest can mean humble or limited. It's like learning the grammar of meaning. And seeing the families, like priority and prioritize, or prevail and prevalent, helps build a mental network.
It makes it stick better than just memorizing a list. It feels more like understanding a system.
Exactly. It's about learning how English constructs meaning.
So the challenge for you listening is go back to day 7, part 1, look at these words again in your materials, read the examples. Can you recall the nuances we discussed?
And maybe start noticing them elsewhere, in articles, in other study materials. See if the usage fits what we talked about.
Even better, try using 1 or 2 yourself. Write a sentence. That active use really cements it.
Definitely.
And please do let us know how this went for you. Leave a comment. Which word was the trickiest? Which example made something click? Your feedback helps us make these dives better.
And here's something to think about as you keep working on vocabulary this way. How does focusing on context, on words in action, change how you approach a difficult text? Does it feel less like hitting a brick wall of unknown words?
Yeah, maybe more like a puzzle you have the tools to solve.
Perhaps. Because the real power of a word isn't just its dictionary definition. It's how it shapes the meaning around it, how it builds arguments, how it paints pictures. Understanding that is key.
That's a great point to end on, the word's power within the sentence. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Day 7 vocabulary. Keep up the great work, keep reading, keep noticing.
And we'll catch you on the next one.